Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Natasha Bashalieva, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Chris White, and Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Shrey. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any questions for our guests. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Professor Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким поклоном. Ми свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Все буде Україна. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you. Today's guest will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett. The rest of us, please turn off our cameras. Thank you again.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to introduce today's guests of Ukraine podcast, John and Natasha SENNETT, joining us right from Kyiv. And this is our 72nd week of weekly podcast. All of our recordings are available on our website, and so will this one. And John and Natasha kindly agreed to talk to us in two parts, so they will be here also a week from today. Please, the microphone is yours for your presentation, Living Through the Ukraine War.
Hi, everybody.
Just introduce yourself.
Yeah. My name is Natasha SENNETT. Thank you for having us. This is my husband, John.
We've lived in Ukraine since November of 2020. Just came here to be closer to Natasha's parents in Belarus, which obviously has not really happened. And I work remotely. Natasha has been taking classes online. So we're just kind of going to run you through our experience of the war so far, not so much of our backstory. We're really kind of just regular people who came to Ukraine and got caught up in the war. Really, I guess expats is the best way to describe us. So we're going to like take turns on each slide. So I'll do one slide, Natasha will do the next. So can you... Natasha's obviously better at technology than I am.
So go on, you like
Okay.
that slide. So.
Okay, so we're sitting here in Ukraine. It was Christmas. Natasha's brother and sister-in-law came from Belarus. They had to go through all kinds of bureaucracy just to get through the border in early January. And we were hearing the news. They were building troops up on the borders, things of that nature. We started getting emails from the U.S. Department of State and frantic emails like you have to get out now, you have to get out now. Western news outlets were also going crazy, like this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And people in Kyiv were just walking around on the streets like nothing was happening. And then Ukrainian news outlets also were saying, well, we don't think anything's going to happen. Maybe it won't happen. And so we were sitting there and the pictures you see are from February 22nd, which is 2 days before the full-scale invasion at the Kyiv City Opera House, where we went to celebrate my birthday's earlier in February. We went to celebrate my birthday by going to see a play by Gogol, which was St. John's Eve, I think it was. It was a ballet, actually, adaptation of it. So our life on February 22nd seemed very much normal. I mean, there was a lot of paranoia going on and things of that nature, but we were under the impression that Putin was a rational actor at that point and that he wasn't going to do anything like attack Ukraine. Well, on February 24th, we woke up to a different reality.
That's pretty much sums it up. Well, this slide is not really, this is kind of reality of our life. We bought a flat in Kiev before the war. We fell in love with Kiev. We came kind of like for temporary stay because we weren't sure. We were trying to see if things will play out in Belarus a little bit better, because we were patiently waiting since August 2020, once the elections in Belarus happened, and we couldn't go. And so we came to Kiev, and we were renting it first, and then we bought the apartment because we loved Kiev. And we literally just moved in. This is still a mess. It wasn't even finished. We'd like literally just moved in our furniture. Most of the things were still kind of in boxes, and then what you see right here is basically part of that. So, but this is when we picked up the phone and we were looking at it. It's not just me. I was doing. John was doing. We couldn't believe that the war has started. This is Samantha. This is Philly. Our two rescue dogs from the United States we brought with us. They adapted really well. So this is basically it. Well, we stayed because, well, first of all, we thought that maybe in a couple of weeks, this was crazy. Things were gonna play out, and somebody's gonna do something to solve the situation. So we were not really panicking, even though a night before, U.S. Embassy called us both. I remember picking up the phone, the difference in time, and a representative on the phone politely asked me if I was, well, she didn't say if I was in my right state of mind, but she said, Miss, are you at least 18 years old? Can you make a decision for yourself? I said, yes, thank you. We are staying, we're not leaving Ukraine because, well, we just moved in, we loved our flat, we just renovated everything. And this was home, so we were not going. And second of all, Samantha, this is the dog that you see. She was really sick by then with cancer. She couldn't move really well, and it's just traveling was not an option for us personally. Plus, everybody at that time was trying to get out of city. People with children, families, traffic, it was just backed up. It was so packed up, so it was a mess and traveling for us. I personally also didn't think it was safe based on, because what was happening in the air. We heard the planes. Mostly at that time, everybody was in a state of shock. It was planes above us. We hear them, and we don't know. Is it our planes? Is it Russian planes? What's happening? Everybody's calling, and it was just, it was that kind of time. But so the streets in Kiev emptied out really, really fast, and the city became a ghost in the first week. We managed to stock up on food. John put stock up on food. That actually we stocked up on food before February 24th, because by then U.S. intelligence informed everybody that, well, everybody meaning the citizens, that something is cooking up and it's serious. And me personally, I'm thinking if U.S. intelligence is saying something is going to be happening, that something probably is going to be happening. So let's buy up canned food and whatever we could get our hands on, like something that will survive. I don't know how many weeks to come. I was thinking weeks, maybe, hopefully.
We had about a month's worth, including bottled water.
Which at the time.
And dog food.
And dog food, yes, for us it was important. But okay, so the next slide.
Okay, so that was the beginning of the Battle of Kyiv. And you can see Philly there by the windows. We taped off the windows.
Because, well, sorry to interrupt, but at the time, Kiev was not as defended as it is right now.
Right.
Kiev, we did not have Patriots. We did not have major air defense going on, and everything that was falling, it was, you know, the building, there was a reverberation going on. And
right. So eventually the Russians got further in, and we could hear artillery on a regular basis, like just all the time. Night, day, didn't matter. You could hear their artillery, but you could hear that it was, you know, not real close. It was close enough to hear it, but it was not real close. And of course, the thing that people don't think about is like, well, dogs don't know that there's a war going on. They have to go out and do their business. So, you know, we went together to walk the dogs because we figured, well, if something's going to hit us, we may as well be together when it hits us. And that was just, that was our reality at the moment. And then, of course, the other thing that came up during that time was be suspicious of anybody you don't recognize in your neighborhood. And literally, like Natasha said, it was a ghost town. So we pretty much knew who belonged in the neighborhood and who was a regular here. But there were Russian agents running all around, and saboteurs running around. They were marking locations for strikes with X's and all kinds of different things as far as, you know, where their artillery or where their planes should strike. So, you know, we had to keep our eyes open constantly. And I remember making, there was a bot or a Telegram chat bot, and I saw a bag sitting on the sidewalk that looked suspicious, and I sent it to him, and it was probably just somebody's garbage, you know.
but it was, yeah, everybody was kind of paranoid a little bit.
Yes.
Because a few days prior to Battle of Kiev, I think it was, we woke up in the middle of the night because somebody was screaming in the yard, and I was trying to figure out, like, I mean, we kind of sleep with one eye open. Either way, you don't really sleep. You don't just pass out and enjoy rest from the day's toil. You just kind of always on guard. Even when you sleep, you have your phone next to you. You have all the supplies that you need just in case you need to go to the bomb shelter. So I remember waking up. It was like around 3 a.m. because somebody was yelling something in the yard, and I was trying to figure out what he's yelling. And then we came out to the balcony, and he was saying, people wake up, Katsapy, that's how Russians are called in the city. So that was just, I still remember that. And it was just like, it kind of gives me chill even now, like 500 and some days of war. I still remember that night because we didn't know at the time. We were just watching the news, but a lot of times it was basically recycling the same material. You know, Russians are there. There was a battle there, but nothing was really explained live what's happening. It was just one of those. And then, of course, later Telegram channels and everything. So we weeded out a bunch because some of them were propaganda, actually, at that time. There's still a bunch of them like that, but I still remember that. So that we couldn't like go back to sleep or anything, because what does it mean for us if Russians are in the city? So it was a really dark time.
Wait.
Alcohol, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there one of the Russian or two Russian vehicles got through in a district called Obolon, which is just north of us. The district just north of us, and they broke through. You know, and we could hear small arms fire in the distance, like, you know, AK-47s. I'm assuming Kalashnikovs were shooting. And then the SBU headquarters is only, I don't know, a couple.
Let's not.
Well, it's not far. It's not far from our house. Let's put it that way. And we could hear gunshots going off over there. So in between all this, you know, we start running out of supplies. So then you have to go out, and the grocery stores, a bunch of them stayed open. Is that somebody on there?
That's not yours.
Okay.
And that's not mine.
Is that somebody with their phone on? Okay. That's not us. So anyway, so we would have to go out with the dogs and on supply runs, and you have to look at every place where you can take shelter, because the air raids were almost constant in those days. The good thing is that the mayor of Kyiv, Mayor Klitschko, which everybody knows, Vitaly Klitschko, he banned alcohol sales, I think, in the first week because people were drowning themselves in drink. And
he was afraid that was going to happen, really.
Yes.
Much.
And that was a big thing, because after a few days of the banned sales, you could see some of the alcoholics walking around with crazy eyes and shaking, and so that added to the paranoia of the whole situation. Okay, next one. You should talk about that one.
Oh, all right. This is moving forward. This is when we kind of got our wits back together, and we were still, of course, I don't want to say we became brave overnight or anything. There's always fear when you live in the war zone. But since we knew our situation, we were staying put, we kind of had to move on with our lives,
and the Russians had
the
battle. This was in early March, the Battle of Kyiv, or I guess mid-March. The Battle of Kyiv was officially over.
Yeah, this is kind of nostalgic to me, because by then, small little coffee stands began to reopen. Because in other words, think of it, the first 2 months, everybody is wiped out. Businesses are closed. Everything is closed. A couple of grocery stores open, basically, and that was it. So things like cafes or even a tiny little coffee stand that you don't appreciate, let's say, in the normal circumstances. And then here it is. He opened up, and we obviously all ran to it. Just like, look at that. We can have a latte. Oh, my God. That was just so much joy. And this is the reason we have, I guess, this picture is just to kind of give you an idea about Ukrainian people and their perseverance in the face of everything. This is when I, for the first time maybe in my life, became really, really conscious and proud of the fact that I'm half Ukrainian. My dad is Ukrainian, and part of his family still lives here in Western Ukraine. How resilient, how creative they are, and how they don't lack a sense of humor, even in the toughest situations. And you can see that some baristas came up with some really cool messages for people to just kind of brighten everybody's spirit, I guess. It's just people just moved on, accepted the reality for what it was, and tried to, I guess, find our way in it, in our new normal, if you can say that. So this is a little rough. I'm not going to translate it, but basically it says, get out, in so many words, without using curse words. But this is when, I guess, this one is funny, because that was one of those days when gypsies, which, live here, stole one of the Russian tanks. So baristas obviously acknowledged that. And this one is Доброго вечора, мы з України, means hi, how are you? We're from Ukraine, or good evening, we're from Ukraine is a better translation. And this is obviously Slava Ukraini.
Right. So what happened is that, we gathered strength and confidence from the Ukrainians themselves, because I have no Ukrainian blood, and she got in touch with hers. And that through all this, it was spring. The flowers were starting to bloom. And it's just gave you this look on life. It doesn't matter that it's war. Nature is going to go on, even if we don't. That was my.
And also, this was spring of 2022. This was time when everybody, people who stayed, or people who let's say, took their families out of the country, children and wives, and came back to fight. People who stayed, it was a time when everybody was just, people became tight in the sense that we were, like, we knew we're in it together, and it was just kind of like a team effort in everything. And the country just sort of came together. It was kind of like Maidan in 2014. And Revolution of Dignity, when people were just, you know, you're one of us. We would see each other, and people, like, for instance, like, we would never say, Kyiv is a big city, so you go in and you don't just say hello to people in the street. It's just, that's not how it's done. So, but in this time, everybody recognized one another. We've seen each other, and we just like smiled, and maybe that was the time when we just kind of like gave each other hope. If we were to die, maybe we're not going to die alone. Okay, you go on.
No, I was just moving to the next
No, but you go for the slide.
Okay, so after all that, we gained the confidence. Still, mostly Kyiv was still not a lot of people had come back yet. People were starting to trickle in slowly but surely.
Yeah.
And I guess it was May, June. They started taking the tanks that were destroyed in Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel, and displaying them on St. Sophia's Square. And if you look at the middle one, you can see that the statues, the historical statues there, are covered in sandbags because, you know, we were still getting hit with airstrikes on a regular basis, but not like the big airstrikes that came later, which we'll talk about at some point. But so we went to see, you know, the equipment that we heard firing in the background for those first couple of months, because we wanted to see what had happened. And then all the truths about Irpin and those places started coming out about
what actually happened.
What actually happened there. And it was just, you couldn't help but to be emotional about it. It was this awful torture and well, you all know what has happened if you've seen it and you're paying attention. But for us, it was more a personal level because we could hear what was happening because you know, we're in the center of the city, and that's, I think, 15 to 20 kilometers from where we are. So we could hear everything that was being fired and shot there, but we didn't know actually what was happening. We could, you know, we could read our Telegram channels and say, well, they took this, they did that, but nobody really knew what had happened to the civilians. And then that came out, and then they were angry, and they started displaying the tanks. Okay, you can do the next slide.
Okay, this one is
me? Okay. All right. So June comes, things quieted down. There was not a lot of air raids at that time.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was quiet. Per the war, it was quiet. Let's put it that way. So we're like, we need to take a break and go out and be in nature and be away from downtown. But we didn't want to really leave Kyiv so much. So we found this little Airbnb on the river, on the Dnipro River, and we went and sat there for 4 days and got suntans, and we barbecued and we did banya. And I don't know if everybody knows what banya is, but basically it's like it's kind of like a Finnish sauna, but it's
a wet sauna.
It's a wet sauna, right? A Finnish mix of both, where you build your own logs and you make it, and it was just like this cleansing time for us. And I think it was time just to feel, I think it was the first time that we felt hopeful and normal. And like, obviously, if you can see, like the landscape is gorgeous. And right behind the trees over here, where I'm barbecuing, is the bridge across the Dnipro. But because the trees block it, you can't even tell that the city is there. So. I think you have to press.
Yes, no, yeah. All right, so this was when, this was the day when Kiev got hit badly. This was our perimeter. It's very, very close to the house. What you see is Shevchenko Boulevard. This is basically the day when I slept in. This is the route that I take to walk my dogs. I was studying that night because by then I rolled into online classes in one of the universities in the States. And I just slept in. I was really tired. And in other words, we missed this. Like if I went my normal time, I would have not made it, because where the bombs fell, that's exactly where I walk. Like exactly where I walk. We're across the street. So I'm looking at it and still thinking, when it hit, I thought that maybe like the sound was kind of like when garbage trucks move about and they just like sometimes you hear it in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's just like a lot of like fuss and that you hear from like a garbage trucks that are close by. And it felt like maybe they dropped a recycling bin or something. That's basically, and I thought that, oh, wow. And then there was the second hit and then the third hit. And at that time, John was literally like, getting the dog ready to take Philly for a walk. I was on Telegram channel immediately looking what was going on, but that was the day when they hit the playground, and then they boasted about it in the news, like it was some major. Yeah, so that's in the same perimeter. So
go to the next, because it has it has that picture.
Yeah, that's the one.
Right.
Well, it's kind of just close. This is the playground that they hit. I remember past. This is like literally we walked by it right here. Anyways, there's just that audacity after that on their propaganda channels and everything that were putting on and saying like, yeah, look at us. This is like literally, this is where they have the swings for the kiddos, for like I'm talking preschoolers and everything.
And they were bragging about it. And then these photos I took myself, I went out because once the missiles hit, you kind of wait and see if any more are going to hit. And usually if there's enough of a time lag, you figure out that, well, they shot what they shot. And I walked, and the dog had to go. So I took these pictures, except for the one of the pit and the one of the previous.
This is the one I took.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's basically, this is what's happening. That was happening to Kiev before Patriots and good or Iris-T's were here.
Yeah, it was October 10th.
Okay, this was time when Philly. Shh. This was time when John and I. This was the end of October. This is when things started getting bad. In the sense, not so much that it's not that they were not bad before. It's just what we were dealing with was power outages, and they were not scheduled. They were kind of like just boom, we have no electricity for 3 days. And John works remotely. And I, at the time, was just to keep my mind in the right place. I signed up for online classes with Longwood University, and I was wrapping up my semester. I had to take exams and everything. Everything is online, and I was literally didn't want to lose. I didn't want to just flunk it because of that. And so we made the decision to go west, where missiles did not, it's not that they didn't reach it, but the place that we chose, the trajectory for missiles was very unlikely. And when we came to Chernivtsi, which is Western Ukraine, it's true, they only knew war by the sound of air raids, and that was it. That was, God bless them. They have not experienced, missiles falling and what happens to you when you are feeling helpless, what happens to the building which you're in when it shakes and the windows kind of give a little bit and you wonder what's going to happen. Like Chernivtsi, that they did have power outages at that time. The whole entire country suffered through it, but they were scheduled, so he could work, so we can continue, and I could continue my classes, and I did finish the semester.
And then, there's a lot of rehab places in Chernivtsi, so we would see wounded soldiers, on crutches and things of that nature, and just be thankful that they were still alive, and that Chernivtsi, a place like Chernivtsi, existed for us and for them to recover, because it was quiet, and Philly obviously found a friend when we were there. And then, it's a completely different culture than Kyiv. It's a lot quieter. It's closer to the Romanian border. It's in what's an area called Bukovina. So, and then I found out that Ivana Franca, is that how you say his name? Ivan Franca, that he attended university there at Chernivtsi State University. So I read one of his books while we were there, and it was a quiet time, and it was also Thanksgiving and Christmas, which, we had really only celebrated our first Thanksgiving and Christmas the year before here in Kyiv when the flat was just finished. And now here we are away from home. And it didn't, we tried to celebrate the holidays, and people in Chernivtsi they had trees, and it was, it was pretty and everything, but it didn't feel quite the same because we missed Kyiv.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to the next one. I came across this, and because at that time you started counting days, and you start wondering, will the war at some point be over? How long do we have? And it's just people start losing hope because this Lend-Lease didn't seem to do much for anybody, not as much as everybody was hoping for, obviously. And yes, I found this poem. It just kind of brightened up my spirits. It's by Longfellow. And I just kind of thought it made me think of Ukrainian army, how they grind everything slowly, but yet they grind exceedingly small. Though with patience you stand waiting, with exactness grinds he also. Just kind of made me think, that, все буде Ukraine. It means, everything will be Ukraine.
And it's written in Ukrainian
No, it's actually.
It's in English?
It's no, I wrote English. It's actually in Russian, I think.
It's in Russian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing. Even in Chernivtsi, which, people always say that, oh, well, in Western Ukraine, they really, they're against Russian speakers. Well, I heard Russian on the streets of Chernivtsi every day, and I heard nobody saying anything or getting angry about it. That's the last one.
Oh, that's the last one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's about it.
So that is our presentation so far, and I'm trying to get back to the screen.
Okay. Stop sharing somewhere in here. Close them. Right.
Right.
And that's that. That's it.
Did it stop?
Yeah, I think it's stopped sharing.
Can you see us?
You need to stop sharing your screen again. Yes, now we can see you and faces of everyone, and I open microphone to all kinds of comments and questions, please. Katerina.
Oh, I see that Dean Deutsch has a question, has his hand raised. Let's start with him.
Leonard Deutsch, please.
I have two questions. One is about morale and how long it can be sustained given the uncertainty of the outcome of this war. And the other question deals with the ability of people who have family or friends either in Belarus or in Russia who are in Ukraine being able to communicate freely with them. So if you could address those two, I'd appreciate it.
I'll address the first one. I'll let her address the second one because she does it. Morale, you can't beat it. Some days you can walk down the street here in Kyiv, and if you didn't know there was a war, you wouldn't know there's a war. The people here are very resilient and they're very positive and they're not willing to give up.
Can I add on to that?
Sure,
a
of
little
course.
bit? As an example, so across the street we have this little cafe. They opened literally in the midst of the war. They started renovating the space before the war started, and then obviously, you know, it was an uncertain period. But the point I'm making is that they opened in the midst of it. Not only they managed to stay afloat, they are like the most popular spot right now, I guess, because people who stayed here, they appreciated those little places that stayed open despite it all,
Or opened.
despite it all, and they continued just doing what they were doing, like serving the best croissants and coffee. But the curious thing about them is that every time, like our spirits would be down, like the missile hit, you know, everybody's feeling a little bit down or a little quiet or subdued, processing everything. They just kind of like a gift to everybody would go and decorate outside with something funky and cool. Like they will do a display of some sort that just brightens it. It's just, in other words, small things like that. So think about it. When everybody's down and feeling down, they're just, hey, let's go ahead and decorate this. It's going to be so awesome. And they did. Like they put like some awesome flower displays. And,
Flowers, mushrooms. They did a Christmas display.
you know, it's something really small. It's a small place, but just it's an act of itself that, you know, in the midst of a war, when everybody's on the brink of, I don't know, different mixed feelings, obviously, for everybody, but, you know, they'll go in and do something either way, like decorate, display, like nothing is going on. It's not to say that people are in denial. It's not about that. It's they're doing it despite of what's happening. And being that you are kind of a foreigner in this land, now we don't feel that way, obviously, because when you go through the war with people, you just kind of, there is that bond that is invisible, that just, it cannot go anywhere. It doesn't matter where you're from, where were you born, or the language you speak. If you stayed here and you went through that and you supported one another, you become one of this, you become Ukrainian by spirit. And it's very contagious because they're very resilient people. Like I experienced it myself through, just because I don't really quite speak the language really well just yet, but I understand it all. And mine is more of a mix of 3 languages in there involved and English in between. But you appreciate that, and it's contagious. That courage that they, despite it all, they're showing, it's contagious for everybody. And I think that a lot of people who come here, they're, because I don't know, for example, how, like being in, I lived in America for like over 20 years, and I cannot tell you what would have happened if America was going through something like that with morale. It's hard to say. I guess it's just, let's hope nobody ever will have to find out. But over here is that little flame, that humanity that just, despite it all, I think they preserved it.
Yes, and tell him about how you speak to your family.
As far as speaking to my family, well, thankfully, my people, my family in Belarus, they're adequate people. But I don't speak openly to them about war, only because every time, it's not for their sake more than for mine, really, because, you know, every time, like on the phone, there's something, that click goes on, like somebody's listening in. So we don't really discuss war. We do it through, if there is that need to unload the feelings, we do it through Telegram channels. But my family is supportive of us, of Ukraine, and is just as sad about the whole thing, I think, as anybody in their right mind is, really.
And plenty of other people have relatives in Russia and do the same thing. You know, with Telegram, with WhatsApp, nobody trusts Viber anymore. So,
But even Telegram, it's not, there is no really way of, well, so far, you know, knocking on wood, my family did not, well, because they do have what's called random checks up there. They will just burst into the apartment, knock everything over and take you places, and then your family doesn't know where you are. Or if they, for example, if you're too open, they can take your children. It's like North Korea, really. And my brother, my godson is there, my brother's son. So they have to be careful in terms of how they express it, because they're literally powerless. And there's also a difference between Belarusian and Ukrainian people in that sense, that whatever is happening in Belarus right now would never be happening in Ukraine. It's just Ukraine and Ukrainian people, they're too free-spirited. The whole country would be upside down in 3 days if, for example, after elections, what was happening in Belarus in 2020, and the people were taken, abused, tortured, raped in prisons, and everybody was just like taking videos to record it or whatever. Like, I'm thinking to myself, that's
in Ukraine,
in
they'd
Ukraine
be
that
fighting.
in Ukraine that would be Maidan all over, and it's just it's a different perspective. And people from there is a division, division
Right.
of Belarusians that fight for Ukraine.
Yes. Regiment.
It's a regiment, yes. That fights for Ukraine alongside with Ukraine right now.
Just like there's two Russian
At least that
ones as
part
well.
makes me proud that, you know, there's that, but.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other
Very,
questions?
very interesting, your responses. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Leonard Deutsch, our common regular guest, our former graduate dean of Marshall University, and we have a lot of guests today. Some people even that I don't know. Dr. Shrey, please, your comments and questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this first part of your story, and I look forward, although my heart breaks for you, to next week's part of your story. The picture where you walk Philly, and I think everyone's heart stopped when we saw that. It's one thing to see images in the news that you've taken by photographer, but like if you know the photographer and what the pictures John took, it really just shows, well, one, the impact of the horror, but also we understand now that the skies over Kiev are safer. That is correct, right? We've heard because of
Safer, yes.
Safer, right? Not safe. So it really does underscore how important that is to keep that up. That really does, that playground burst apart. Awful. You mentioned language. Natasha, and I am curious about something. The term "Все буде Україна" has, and I'm going to translate. I'm purposely not translating it right now for our American viewers because I have a question first before I translate it. That came about maybe, at least here in America, among the Ukrainian American community, maybe about 5-6 months ago. It was not a phrase. When it's Slava Ukraini, Все буде Україна is something that I've encountered when I go back to Philadelphia. There's a very strong Ukrainian American community. And I see there's Ukrainian shops, there's Ukrainian Cultural Center. So I see that, Все буде Україна, and we've adopted that too as part of our welcome to Ukrainians. I'm curious about the translation because I've seen it translated how you just translated it, but I want to explain to our audience now, Все буде Україна, each of those words. Буде is will be, it's the future tense of the verb to be. Ukraina obviously is Ukraine, so will be Ukraine. That first word, I think there are different translations of it. Все, in one sense in Ukrainian, is always. There will always be Ukraine. But it also means everything. I think I heard you say everything will be Ukraine, right? Oop, I may be frozen. Let me see. I can't tell if I'm frozen or not, so if someone can send me in the chat.
You're not frozen, but Natasha and John are.
Okay. Well, that makes more
sense. It's their frame. If they cannot hear us, I don't think they are here right now. They will
connect. Yeah.
They will probably need to log off and log on again because their frame is frozen.
Okay.
But as we're
your language abilities. I'm wondering too, have you heard this? Все буде Україна. I've seen it in signs in stores. Translate it, everything will be Ukraine. But I think connected with the word, I think it's more of a reassuring, like the Ukrainian national anthem, Ще не вмерла Україна. Ukraine is not yet dead, right? It's always it's kind of a weird way to be optimistic, but so the idea of Все буде Україна, it's almost it's a reassuring reminder there will always be Ukraine, despite what Putin is doing. There will always be Ukraine. But I have heard it translated the other way too. Everything will be Ukraine. So it just I was curious about that because I have heard it officially translated. I've seen it translated in writing the other way as well. So
I think there are people in the audience who can advise on this, but right now we have Senate's frozen, and they're probably trying to get back to us. So I might connect on Facebook, but surely we haven't finished yet. We have finished with their presentation though, and if somebody has more comments or questions, you can open your microphone and say something, but let me try to, maybe I should remove them from the meeting and ask them to join back. Maybe there is interference. I just did that.
And while you're doing that, Victor, would it be okay if I comment on some of the other things while you're trying to read them? So one of the interesting things that many of our guests have brought up are pets. And so you think, well, there's human life, there's animal life, and it's just exactly how important are pets. And pets, of course, are important culturally. They're important to individual families. But I'm amazed at it. But it's also like really humanizes the situation of many of our refugees or those who've chosen to stay and wait out the war in Ukraine. How the concern extends to the non-human members of their families, and it just strikes me as interesting as we've seen repeatedly this interest and concern for pets. We heard from a previous guest how there are pet feeding stations set up throughout the big cities for pets who may have been abandoned by their owners, and so there's a way to kind of sort of like a humanitarian animal welfare concern there. So it's just interesting to me to see that the two dogs were a factor in their decision to stay. And it also is something that I think we can relate to here in America. We care about our pets as well.
It is also very touching to see, and has been through the entire war, how Ukrainians do not abandon their pets, how multiple places for abandoned pets are functioning. In fact, animal hospitals and animal shelters are among the most visible places. Our friends who have been on our program here, we are collecting donations for Lviv, Domivka, which is animal shelter. So it's very important and humane side that Ukrainians, even in this dire situation, did not abandon their pets.
And we even have Hrihor Falkovich, who writes an entire children's book from the perspective of a Jack Russell Terrier.
Yes, we have. Yeah. We have this by Grigory Falkovich, the one of the most prominent Ukrainian children poets, who is now in Western Ukraine with his family. I signaled to our guests to join back, but if they lost the connection, we will wait and we will welcome them again next Friday. As I said, John and Natasha SENNETT were with us with the full real-life oral archive. I cannot say otherwise. This is the history which we are here to record and report, and this is why Ukraine has been going on for 72 weeks, which I personally find the longest project I have been involved in my life. And also at Marshall University, West Virginia, where we are now. We have guests now who might want to speak and comment. If you wish, open your face and ask us anything else, please. I met John SENNETT through accidentally through Facebook. I find a lot of contacts these days on Facebook, although I never used it before the war much. But one thing leads to another, and in fact, I saw John's picture on the Facebook page of Margarita Kuznetsova, our wonderful volunteer who has been on this program several times from Kamenny, which is next to Dnipro, and she was at Kiev, and she met John, and I learned that there is a couple of American expats. He also recommended me to a group on Facebook which has some military experts and other interested people, and we will have some of them on our show also. I really don't want to call us a show. I prefer podcast, although I was told that podcasts do not normally have video. Okay, I'm trying to contact on background the Senate. I don't have their phone, but I send a message. Maybe they lost internet. That's what I think.
Well, we do have Sergei Kamishan offering to call them. He's in Kiev himself right now.
Yeah, but I see, but I don't have a phone number. I do have a Facebook contact though, so I just
misread that. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, but I just messaged.
Oh, here we go. Welcome.
Hi.
Oh,
We
they're
lost
back.
you. I don't know what happened. Did you guys have an issue or did we have an issue?
We don't know. We don't know,
so it's
but
not
welcome back. Welcome back, and more questions, please.
Hold on. Do you want to stay here or do you want to
Stay there, because I
stay
don't know
there?
what's going around.
Oh, okay. Well, no.
Well, we were talking while we were waiting for you to reconnect. We were talking about how there's been multiple times throughout this horrible war that we've talked to people and their pets have been a concern, and that is a very human thing. It's how our species extends care and love to the species entrusted to our care, and so we just talking about how your dogs are part of your family and how they are a priority in your decision making as well. And then also the reality John mentioned, your dogs have to go outside. Like that's something we just don't think about. You know, those of us who are not subjected to the horrors of war. I wouldn't even think about that being something, you know, that was important.
We had a, yeah. You reminded me that, you know, we had curfew in the beginning of the war when they were like catching all the Russian saboteurs. We had curfew for 3 days and 3 nights when they were trying to get them out of the city. There was a lot of them, and so nobody was allowed to leave the houses, basically. Can you imagine with 2 dogs and 2 active animals, like what that turns into? They look at you with wild eyes like, well.
And they're large. Those are huge dogs. They're not little lap dogs.
No. Sammy was
65 pounds and 37 pounds.
You know, so not huge, but they're not lap dogs. Yeah, so yeah.
So I'm curious more about these saboteurs. I apologize, I don't know this. Are these Russian soldiers who are specifically tasked with going in?
Yeah, there were sleep agents that basically got activated on the ground.
Wow.
You know,
FSB.
Special Forces, FSB, and they're all, you know, the city was infested with them. And we did not know at the time that they were marking, you know, so basically every time we would see some type of like little cross or something, we would just all freak out because like, should we call somebody? You know, so you just get paranoid. You don't, you know, every tiny little mark, you think, you know, maybe it was kids playing, but maybe it wasn't, you know, so yes, because at that time, you know, the artillery and the hits and everything was constant, was on a daily basis. So, and, you know, they were not just hitting random, at first, they were not just hitting random houses. There was specific targets for, you know, infrastructure and all that. And, you know, so in order for them to, there were like hundreds and hundreds of them. To take them out, we had curfew. We still have curfew, but now curfew lasts till like 5 a.m. Oh no, till 11.
It's midnight to 5.
Midnight to 5, yes. But imagine like in the beginning we had curfews that were
72
going
hours.
72 hours one was, and then after a little while again, and then finally, you know, they lifted the curfew up and we were able to. But yeah.
So more questions?
But I think I interrupted her and actually
Oh,
didn't
sorry.
ask her. I think I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm kind of the saboteurs. Are they now gone? And how? Like what? So the curfews. Then I would imagine. Then after the curfews were enforced, that anyone who was out was probably a saboteur and collected and moved
Yeah.
out of the city. Yeah, great.
They took out a majority of them. Now they're just sleep agents that were the SBU right now is taking care of them. So in other words, Kiev is the most protected city.
But we
I
don't
think in
doubt that they're
Ukraine.
all over the place.
But they're still, yeah,
Um,
but not in the amounts that they were before.
Thank you very much for explaining that.
You also wanted to ask me something about Все будет Украина.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for reminding. Yes. So I don't know at what point we lost contact, but I'm curious how you translate that phrase. Все буде Україна.
Kind of like, don't worry, all will be Ukraine.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the same sense here, because все
Right.
can mean everything, and it can mean always. And so in a way, it kind of works out really well. And yes, here
Either way it works, yes. Whichever way, it works both ways.
here in the diaspora, we do say to each other as kind of a reassurance, exactly what you said.
Right, exactly. It's a reassuring thing. It's like, all will be Ukraine, don't worry.
Yeah.
Like, all will be well. It's, all will be Ukraine. So.
and then Mayim Shomayim.
There is another one over here. They go Mayim Shomayim. It's like, we got what we got for now.
No, that's good. That's good. The resilience of the Ukrainian people is absolutely.
It's because I think it came basically as a counteract Russian propaganda, which was trying to force everybody's thinking into that Ukraine doesn't exist as a country, not just as in general, that it doesn't exist kind of thing. That's just the whole idea of that. Everybody realizes that it's just, it's a oxymoron. Like, how this doesn't exist if you invaded it and you're trying to protect it, also protected, let's use the air quotes here, but either way. So I think that's just came as a reassurance to people and just.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. More questions from our guests or panel, please. We have time, and it's an hour. We have been here, but we don't have to end on an hour. So can you give us, while people are asking or thinking, can you give us a few words about what you would like to talk about next week?
I was going to talk a little bit about what happened after Chernivtsi, only a little bit, but we were going to show some of the art exhibits that we've been to since the war started, art that was created during the war and the importance of it for us in Ukraine, I think, and also for the world, really. So the creative side that we see consistently developing, kind of finish in a short what happened after Chernivtsi when we came back, and then onto art.
Unless you maybe would like to just have an open discussion with questions and answers kind of thing.
We always do open discussion with any questions which may be asked. People may be shy or not sure what a presenter wants to answer. But since we had some background, I wonder if John or you will say something about the situation with Orthodox churches, because this issue is ongoing and very recent, and most Americans, even Orthodox Americans, are not sure what's going on.
We can do the whole program on that if you want, because it's very in depth.
It would be nice, because we haven't had anyone talking on these issues.
We'll do that,
and you need to start 1,000 years before now to understand what has been going on. But of course, we always welcome stories like your personal stories of survivors, stories of people helping, anything really.
Well, we'll do the Orthodox side because it's obviously close to our hearts, and I as an American am serving as an altar server in an Orthodox church where I don't speak the language.
So for you, it's definitely.
Well, it was for us too. In our first interview,
Yeah.
the French press that interviewed us the first time found us in St. Voldemort's Cathedral when we were going to liturgy.
Only because, right, at that time, one is still now, it's just you had to come to terms that, if God wants you, he will take you. And maybe that was your time. And we were dealing with that. And that's how.
Yeah, so we can talk about it.
Yeah.
That's very important, of course, because people here are far away, and you as expat Americans, you know much more about the situation of level of knowledge here, especially in small areas, because we're not in a big city. We don't have any Slavic communities. We barely have any foreigners except of our medical school doctors from all over the world, as usual. But the diversity here is low, much lower than in Kiev, I'm pretty much sure. So for our students, our faculty, and many others, many things that we hear on this program for 70 weeks are completely new. They can't imagine. Many Americans, I don't have to tell you, but I tell our audience, many Americans are still under impression that Ukraine and Russia are sort of sister countries and brotherly peoples. Most of these illusions have been somehow festering, I guess. But thank you. And do we have more questions, please? No. Well, Sergey.
Somebody put their hands up.
Yeah, that's my old friend from Kiev, next door to you. Pan Commission. Sergey, please speak English.
Добрий вечір.
Доброго вечора.
Доброго вечора. I have a little comment on previous discussion on Все буде Україна.
Okay.
Do you see this book?
Так.
It was published in 2014.
In Біла Церква?
Біла Церква, це it is only publishing house was situated in Біла Церква. But the author of this book was living on the very brink of Russian border in Luhansk region. And she experienced the first days of invasion, the first days of the war of 2014. And here is her impressions of this war, of living in little settlements of miners. There are mines in that region, you know.
Yes, of course.
Coal and I don't know, maybe ore, iron ore. And she named her book Все буде Україна. Everything, always there will be Ukraine. And I have a hypothesis that when Yanukovych came to power in 2010, there was a real invasion of semi-criminal elements from Donbass to Kyiv. And I saw not an only time, many times, graffitis on the walls. Все буде Donbass. That is that Yanukovych's people from Donbass will take the power and keep in whole Ukraine. And maybe this is the reply on that criminal slogan.
It could be.
And the book you are showing.
Where it is, but we have to ask Mrs. Olena Stepova why she took this.
But maybe, though, in all, Ukraine will have the last word in all of this, whichever way it came out, despite what Kremlin thought, despite what they did. I think that in the end, that saying also says that, to me, that Ukraine will have the last word.
Yes, Ukraine will have the last word. And for me, I was for 4 decades living in Siberia and was engaged in the Ukrainian movement in Siberia. You know, there were many peasants that migrated to Siberia in so-called Stolypin reforms in the beginning of...
they were moved, not so much that they...
There were exiles, prisoners. Then when the academic town was created near Novosibirsk, the scientists, not only from Moscow, but from Ukraine as well, migrated there and worked. And many other channels there are. When Ukrainians moved to Siberia. Moreover, in the Far East, in the Russian Far East, from Khabarovsk to Vladivostok, so-called Primorsky Krai, maritime region, maybe. The Ukrainian population exceeded 60%. So I think that Все буде Україна maybe have connection with Siberia and Far East, that sometime those Ukrainians who moved there, their parents or their grandfathers moved there, maybe they will remember their inheritance and they will think themselves as Ukrainians, and there will be Ukraine also. But it is a little fantastic.
It's a really interesting. Really interesting.
I recommend to connect with this woman.
Let me see her last name a little bit better.
Olena Stepova, it's her pseudonym. Her real name is Olena Stepanets, as I remember. She had to flee from Lugansk region, and now she lives in Cherkasy region, I think. It's a farm there. Maybe she will be an interesting person for this panel, but as I know, she don't know English. Your microphone is out.
It's fine. We translate when we have to from both languages, I guess. A notice for our audience who may not have noticed. The book you showed is in Russian. It's not in Ukrainian.
That's because people in that
Donbass.
region,
Yes,
in the bus, because they speak Russian, just
and
like
this,
Kharkiv. Is also Kharkiv, Kherson.
Right.
They're
And
mostly Russian speaking, but now people consciously made the choice to switch to Ukrainian, even those who spoke Russian their whole lives, living in Ukraine. They,
Yes.
you know, because like when we were in Chernivtsi, Chernivtsi accepted a lot of refugees from different areas that got bombarded badly, and people who were misplaced. So we had a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of stories from people who specifically moved to Chernivtsi, and they made that conscious decision. They were learning, so to speak, Ukrainian. I don't want to say all over. It's not that they didn't know Ukrainian before, but they made that choice. And some who didn't started learning it so they could speak Ukrainian now. They made that distinction. Mm-hmm. And people from Luhansk and Donbass.
But I have to stress that Olena Stepova writes both in Ukrainian and in Russian. And only this book specifically was written in Russian, but not in whole. Some texts are written in so-called Surjik, a mix.
That's what I, right now, that's my extension of the language. I speak Surjik. I'm trying to, but it's, learning a different language is something that just doesn't happen overnight. So I can understand basically 97%, only a few words that I might be. But as far as fluency in speaking it, I didn't get a chance to myself to practice it. When I was a child, when I was coming to Vinnytsia, that's where my grandmother is from, we were fascinated because everybody spoke Ukrainian, and we stayed for summer, my grandparents and everything. And by the end of summer, I was pretty much, an everyday kind of speech. I could speak Ukrainian. But then I would be going back home to Belarus and everything, and in a few months, that would just
take care of something for work.
Right. But anyways, and now that I moved to the States and I lived in the States, so English is kind of like, that's the language I prefer. That's the language I started learning when I was in 4th grade. And that's when I came to America, I didn't hang out with people from either Russia or Belarus. I was basically immersed into American culture. And I spent my whole adult life in the States, and English is basically my preferred language right now. But I am learning Ukrainian with pleasure. I'm enjoying it. My husband is also
not as easy.
But it's just not as easy for him. For me, it's kind of, it's a matter of practice more so than anything.
My kids are learning on an app. I grew up speaking Ukrainian. It's my first language, but I grew up in Philadelphia. And when I was growing up in the northern cities, Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, New York, Toronto, there was such enclaves of Ukrainians. Church was in Ukrainian, Scouts was in Ukrainian, Saturday school, little shops. So, but my children have a general understanding of Ukrainian, but they don't speak it. But boy, since the war started, they're on the apps and learning phrases every day, and it's very heartwarming.
You know that what our dog's name is?
I know Philly. Philadelphia.
Philly.
I saw the Philadelphia Eagles shirt. Yeah, that's a nice connection.
Yeah.
He's got that character. He's that,
He's got that Philly character.
It suits him really well. He's very much he's got a little bit of a fighter in him.
Broad Street bully.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So it's just, we saw him. It's just, that's Philly. That's Philly. We called him Philly cheesesteak, but it's just Philly. So that Philly. And he's our war animal. He went through with it, through the whole thing, yes. Bombings and all. And surprisingly enough, survived the death of my first dog, Samantha. And, knocking on wood, yes, still with us.
Was Samantha in the photos with you when you were laying on the bed? That was also...
Yeah, that was her, yeah. But then she died.
March 25th, 2022.
It was the beginning of war, all of that mess and everything. We were going through that. And by then, all the vets were everybody, we couldn't find a vet
to
put her down because by then, so she went through hell. So for us, it was.
She was our war casualty.
Yeah.
Really, even though she didn't die because of the war.
But
We had to be with her while she went because she had stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
So it was tough.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to you. That's.
Yeah. She was a sweet baby. It's been 2 years and I still cry about it.
Understandable.
Yeah.
She's still with us. We have her ashes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not to delve into details I don't need to delve into, but I think that's kind of amazing that you have her ashes, because the fact that a pet crematorium is functioning is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
That the city is resilient.
Think about it for a second, though. It's the same crematorium that people use for people.
Yeah.
So and they ran out of
Graves.
the longest time they ran out of graves, and it's against Orthodox tradition to be cremated.
But it's just the necessity at this point
they didn't
because
have any place to bury people. Everybody.
Yeah, because of so many deaths and.
Wow, well, that's poignant. Wow.
It's a tough reality.
And I want to thank everybody in America who's watching, and it's better. We came on because we wanted to personalize it so you could see it from an American perspective.
That's unique. We haven't had. I don't think we had expats, American expats, and Natasha is also in a unique position here to triangulate it from all the perspectives. It's just like your age of my children who were also brought little to America, and English is their preferred first language, of course. But we find all kinds of people through friends. We'll appreciate more contacts. We are trying to stay not just as a news outlet, but literally as personal, not private, but oral reports of anyone. We had experts, we had volunteers, we had pretty much across the spectrum everyone, and we do not limit to people from necessarily Ukraine. We had Americans, we had Europeans. I don't think we had anyone from Russia, or at least those residing right now there. Well, if we have no more questions, we would like to finish our recorded session of Ukraine panel right now. Dr. Shrey, please.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні.
Героям слава.
Дякую. Дякую.